Namaste family.
Namaste.
Yeah, we are here at Modular Festival with Ajja, somebody I've been trying to find the time at many festivals to actually be able to meet and have a little discussion about creativity, inspiration, and finally it's happening. So thank you very, very much for accepting to be a part of this. Yes.
It's nice to be here.
Oh, lovely. So could you please introduce yourself to us and our viewers, please?
My name is Ajja. I'm from Switzerland and I make psychedelic trance. What more to say? I'm a musician, not just an electronic musician. I've been a musician all my life and I've been exposed to this particular type of music very young because I grew up in India when I was small. So this is something that's quite close to my heart.
Oh, that's lovely.
I wouldn't say I've always liked it, that's another story sort of thing, but I've been around it a long time.
I would like to know your story so far, you know, like, because I know you are an artist, tattoo artist in your journey, so how did that whole thing flow into where you are now?
Well, like I say, my first memories are Baga Beach, and then Anjuna Beach was later when I was a teenager, but my father was a traveling tattooer, so I'm the youngest of 4 siblings, and the deal my father made with my mother was that he was okay having children, but he didn't want to change his lifestyle. Right. He wanted to keep traveling. So I grew up traveling.
Wow.
So that's the basic thing of where this creativity comes from, is I was very lucky to have artistic-minded parents that always taught me that I could be whatever I wanted. Everything was okay. If I ended up working in quote-unquote a regular job, that was totally fine, but that there was alternative solutions if I wanted to.
Wow.
So I was encouraged from a very young age to do something artistic. I picked music because my brothers and sisters were doing artwork, drawing and tattooing, and it looked very difficult, so I thought music was a lot easier. So I went into that, and I was encouraged. As long as I was always doing something musical, I wasn't bothered so much to be doing household chores, this sort of thing like that. So in a way I was manipulated into it, but in a good way. And then when I was a teenager, my father told me to leave the house for a few months and not to come back, to go play in the streets as a street musician.
Wow.
As a learning sort of experience. So again, it taught me really young that you could have this exchange of energy with people where you do something creative that you like, you give it out into the world. Some people will think it's shit, they won't like it at all. Some people will really like it, and there'll be a return of energy which takes the form of money in some cases, but takes the form of, love, attention, all this sort of thing. What you're giving out, you get back. So that's the general sort of story of creativity, but specifically to what I'm doing now as an electronic musician with psychedelic trance. I was in Goa at the end of the 70s, the beginning of the 80s, then again at the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s, when there was the crossover between electronic music, body pop, what was techno at the time, all these sort of people that started taking other people's music and making remixes where they would chop out all the vocals and just sample little bits of them and make these really weird sort of stuff that was very dance oriented. And I lived through it, but I was a guitar player at the time. My friends, they were all either DJs or their fathers were DJs. So there was this whole connection to it, but I didn't like it at the time. I didn't, obviously it was going into my brain, but it wasn't something that I connected with, because for me it was too basic. That was the way. For me, a musician had such finesse in everything.
Absolutely.
You know, there's always the thing that, it's something I've been told that I believe is that the closest connection you can have with another human being through music is with your voice, because you're giving your emotion into a vibration that other people connect with, and then you go through an instrument, and then it depends how proficient you are with your instrument. That's why the Jimi Hendrix and all these sort of people had a really good connection, because they were so fucking good at it.
They could speak through it.
They were speaking through it. But then here you came to electronic music, and suddenly you had this kind of barrier in a way. And at the time, the machines were a lot more limited. You didn't have laptops and sample banks and all this sort of stuff, you know, and all these sort of things. So, so it's quite funny, because now, as I've evolved in this world, I've met a lot of these people that were making the music that I listened to as a child. And I've gone back and I've dug through and found all these songs. And now I really appreciate them for what they were with the tools at the time. The amount of themselves that they actually managed to put into it is quite uncanny, actually. But yeah, so for me it wasn't my thing for a long time until quite late in life, until when I was in the mid-20s. I had a life situation where I had a need to party once again, because I had lots of father dying, I'd split up with my ex-wife, lots of things to work out.
Right.
And I was tattooing a friend of mine who was a Gaspar, he's a DJ at the time, and I was doing these big tribal arms on him. So I said, I need to party, take me to a party. So he took me to small parties in Switzerland, and I encountered this music again, and I was like, wait, it's the same thing that I remember from a child, but the complexity had evolved. There's layers, there's all these things, and so I got interested in it, in making it, and obviously at that time I was going out to parties and experiencing it all again, as if like having a second teenagerhood, if you put it that way, sort of thing. So I was experiencing it, listening to it, having these links back to what I remembered as a child, and putting all my musical knowledge into it together, ended up with where I am now. But the thing is, me and my friend Gaspar, we started making music, but we actually did something that was, we were trying to make what we were hearing, what other people were doing, but we kind of fucked it up. Because at the time, music had a big kick, and it still does. If you listen to it and you zoom out a bit, it goes rum da da rum da da rum da da. Big kick and small bass and big basses. We didn't get that. We made small kicks. So we made small kick and three basses. So we made da 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 da. So we kind of pioneered this style where it was less focused on the big kick and more focused on an actual vibration that sustains people.
Absolutely.
So, but it's funny that we didn't realize it until 10 years later. Looking back at it, once we learned how to do the other way, we were like, oh, that's what happened. It was actually a mistake, because we didn't have YouTube or tutorials or all this sort of stuff. We got high in the studio. That's what we did. And we used our brains to try and figure out how this was done, by listening to stuff, trial and error, And the funny thing, what I realized is, when you get into this thing, simplicity is key. When you're very high and you get debilitated by whatever's going on, you can't make lots of complicated stuff. And we were looking for this magic ingredient that is not fucking there. What's there is your personal feeling, your emotions, your vibration, what you're doing, translating through a machine, which is your brain, working through these things, making something that other people are going to listen to and that you're going to use as a tool on a dance floor. But one other thing I just wanted to say about this is, I didn't get into this thing. Of programming. I hate programming. We recorded stuff, and that's quite a big difference. And it's something that links back to a lot of the early tracks. They were played
almost acoustic style.
People would set them up on sequences that were sequencing into like synthesizers and samplers, but then they were all running into a mixing desk. If you look at Hallucinogen, Phosphor, and all this sort of stuff, he mixes every mix. He doesn't go back and actually turn something down by 2 dB. Either it was a good mix or it's fucked, sort of thing. So, and that's a concept that I brought from funk and rock and all this sort of stuff into electronic music. Record takes. If you're in a good feeling and a good vibration, you get something good. If you don't, oh well, chuck it away and then make something good later on that you might like. So try and keep the humanity. That's the way of doing it.
So that whole thing that you spoke about, like the power of the voice being so important for evoking emotion, in the same way you started recording samples instead of producing it through synths to keep, and it actually kept that human touch.
Or even if it's a synthesizer, play the synth and record it at the same time, and then listen to what you have. And generally, if you're, I mean, these days I'm not high in the studio. It's not something that you have to do. It's not something I would even recommend for most people to do as a way of learning how to do this. But if you are in that state and you're doing it, you're listening to a rhythm that you're producing and you're playing something over it, you're going to make something that naturally fits.
Because you're going with it.
So that's the idea of it. And then it's made for people that are going to be listening to it, trying to get, even if they're not on a substance themselves, it's that particular head state that they're trying to actually trigger, that they're trying to get to. One of the biggest compliments I get after playing a live set is, and it happens quite a lot, is people that don't take anything anymore, that had amazing experiences when they were younger, and then they got a message, like a lot of us do, where you don't actually need to do it constantly. That's not the point. The point is to get something out of it that helps you in your life, that actually makes you aware of this universe, this world, what's around you, what's going on, and to integrate it. Integration is
Absolutely.
more important than blasting your brains out, sort of thing.
Exactly,
So a lot of people, when I'm doing this, they actually come back and they say, look, man, just help me get back into the same state.
Right.
I don't trip anymore. I don't do this stuff. No. I had a really fucking good time. And for me, that's a huge honor. That's what the goal is.
This is one of the main things that I'm trying to talk about through this entire documentary and filmmaking, that psychedelic culture has got all the positives of what psychedelics would have. I mean, psychedelic music has got all the positives. Somebody who listens to it for a duration of time actually becomes, changes and evolves in a way of open-mindedness, inclusiveness, judgment-free. Do you agree with that?
Yes, but it's not a given. That's the thing. I've got a lot of friends, they went out to party for years, and they would go out and they would get super high. They'd come back, I'd say, did you have a good time? They'd say, I can't remember. You know,
Oh,
sort of thing. So
hey,
that's,
yeah,
for me,
yeah.
that's not the point either.
Yeah,
It's not just blasting your brains out and actually getting high. It's actually integrating it. That's why I'm a big, it's good to do these things as a group with people at parties and all this sort of stuff, but I think there's a lot more benefit from going out into a forest and actually quieting, quieting down and actually trying to understand the point. And when you do that, you realize that you don't need such huge quantities.
No.
They're actually counterproductive. The thing to do is to minimize what you're doing and maximize the actual effect that you're getting out of it and the benefit that you're getting from it.
So true.
So, but yes, it does go into the culture, the musical culture. There's no getting away from it. It's part of what this music is made for in a way, but it doesn't mean you have to actually be high to actually
Sure thing,
do it.
yeah, definitely. Like, I think the music itself is powerful enough, if you can actually
Should be,
use it in the right way. So talking about that, do you have a creative process that you follow when you write music?
I have lots of them. That's the only way to put it, and I try to switch around with them, because if you start doing the same thing again and again, it becomes a formula,
Sure.
and then you lose the point of it.
Absolutely.
Actually, it's been very difficult for me, because I had 10 years more in this type of music of. I had 10 years or more of discovery and trial and error and all this sort of thing, and then I started playing at bigger events and all this sort of thing, and meeting people that have been doing this for longer than me, and then I got given some tools as to, this is how I do it, this is how I do it,
yeah.
and it was actually an impediment for me.
Right,
Because then I had a surefire way of doing it.
Correct.
So it short-circuited my creative process.
Sure, of
Yeah,
course,
so
yeah.
now I'm going back again.
Exploring without
Yeah.
other inputs, basically.
And I was talking to Rick Tam from GMS actually last week about this, and he said the same thing. He said it's very important to go back again every time you make a track. Start, even if you're doing the same pattern and the same movements, don't reach for the kick and bass that you've used before.
Oh, yeah.
Make a new one.
Wow.
He makes a new one every track,
Okay.
and I agree with that concept.
Definitely.
Even though they end up in the same area, because
Yep.
there's only so many ways that you can do this sort of thing to get to that sort of thing.
Yep.
If you start again every time, you'll have a slight individual
Sure.
thing. And some of it's very basic, is that if you use the same hi-hat samples, when you try and mix them together, the two hi-hat samples, two tracks that have the same sample will start phasing.
They'll zero out.
Yeah, and they'll phase and flange together,
Okay.
and they'll sound wrong, and you won't be able to.
Ooh,
So that's a very
yeah.
good point for actually
Wow,
recreating new ones every time, because then you'll be able to mix them
Yeah,
together.
awesome. Okay. And what about creative blocks? Have you encountered creative blocks? What tools do you use to navigate through them?
Yeah, that's I mean, if you can, getting a new synth or getting a new plug-in or this sort of thing is a good way of doing it. Getting life experience is another way out of creative blocks.
Okay.
The creative blocks I've got is when my life was turning into a pattern
Right,
as well.
right, okay.
And it's the same thing as using the same kick and bass. It means that you're stagnating in a way, sort of thing like that. So usually stop making music for a while.
Yeah.
But that's also why I play guitar and bass and I do other types of music than this. I usually switch on to another type for a while.
Right.
Or I take a project on, like I do this project Novelty Engine in Azora every few years, where it's getting 10 musicians on stage and not preparing anything, or preparing a kick and bass loops, but saying, okay, we're going to play this kick and bass for 7 minutes, but we don't know what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of these musicians don't come from electronic music, they come from reggae or pop, but they've been doing this for decades. So So it's a very risky thing, but it's
yeah.
also a very fun thing, and it's a thing that takes months of preparation and
Okay.
like a lot of effort going into being able to figure it out while we're there,
Oh my
by preparing
God,
all the
yeah.
conditions. So those sort of things get me out of my writer's block.
Awesome,
Because
yeah.
it takes me away from the other thing for a while. But then it always comes back to, I'm back in and I'm playing my solo sets, and I'm mixing, and what I really like is not actually making tracks, I like mixing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this is something that was very important for me before I started making this. In that period, I said, when I was partying and getting interested in this again, I ended up at a friend of mine, DJ Sanuk, in his basement, and it was just the two of us. He had some CDJs set up in his studio,
Nice.
and we were partying, just the two of us, like this into it. And at some point, he did something that made me feel really good, gave me loads of energy.
Wow.
And I went and I recognized it from back as a child.
Right.
So I shouted, "Stop!" like stop.
Yeah.
So he stopped what he's doing, and I went, "What are you doing?" And he went, "I'm mixing."
Yeah,
And I went, "What do you
okay.
mean?" And he took one track out, and suddenly it was just a track I was listening to. And I went, "Put it back." He put it back in, and suddenly there was this vibration going on. And
Energy
so-
exchange.
Yeah, and so I realized that that's the thing I like.
Wow.
That's more the point. The tracks themselves are fucking irrelevant.
Okay.
They don't matter. I'm not a DJ, so I can't use other people's tracks, so I make tracks for
Right.
me. But what I'm making them for is not for other people to listen to or play or anything. It's for me to mix in my live sets.
Oh my God,
They're tools.
yeah, true.
Some go up, some go down, some are big, some are thin,
Yeah.
some are... So the more tools I have, the better it is. So that's the thing that brings me back to this all the time, is I want new material for me to mix.
True.
And once I've gone away and done my novelty engines and other sets and
yep.
recharge my batteries, I can make better product for me. Sort of thing
Absolutely.
that people will enjoy when I'm playing it. Right?
So do you have some, like while creating music to mix, do you have some specific keys that you love to create the music on?
No, there's keys that are difficult, but that's physics. And that's the thing I really enjoy about this is I've always liked math and this sort of stuff as a kid. I'm homeschooled, but I really liked it. And the physics of it is that the kick drum comes down to rest at a certain frequency.
Right.
And there's frequencies that don't work because they're too low for our hearing or the speakers or this sort of stuff.
Yep.
And there's ones that are too high because they go boom, boom.
Yeah.
They don't sound like a kick drum anymore.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah,
So there's
true.
keys like for me, C and C sharp. I've made one track in either one. And they're weird, and I had to keep bouncing back and forth or use a kick in a different key. Very difficult to work with. Generally, everywhere from D sharp, all the way up to, I go up to B, but not a lot of people do.
Right.
Because that's a quite high energy key, but I have to work up to it in my sets.
Right.
I can't just start with the B track.
Sure,
I have
sure,
to get there,
sure,
and then I
sure.
drop down, sort of thing. That's something else that I've noticed as well. A lot of people mix in key, as in they try and harmonize the kick and bass. I don't. I go up. I use them as
tools of energy shift.
So I don't mind if they kind of clash for a little while, and you raise the energy, raise the energy. And when it gets high, then I mix in key to go back down, to drop down, so that then it's got a relation.
That's
sort of thing.
an amazing
So
tip
up
right
by
there.
semitones, down by mixing in key, sort of thing. That's my system for it. And I usually have 2 or 3 waves in a set.
Lovely.
And the last one, I try and get very high on the last one.
Okay.
And then sort of end up somewhere in G or A.
Right.
So it's good for other people
to mix in
mix
from there.
into,
And
sort
go
of
from
thing
there.
like that.
That's amazing, because even in my journey as a DJ, I'm always playing a progressive set, always going up, and that's what I also learned. Like just keep it going. But I'm trying to learn the trick to bring it back down, and that's the challenge. So now I know that should be the key part of it.
That's the one. So like G to E, or G to D. There's relations that come from guitaring and any basic music theory like that sort of thing. Will get you back down, and that'll be a better mix like that. Sort of thing.
Perfect. Thanks. So something that has been a part or associated with this culture is the psychedelics,
Of course,
in many ways. So what is your take on psychedelics with your own experiences, and for people who are concerned about it, what do you have to say?
Well, the first thing I have to say about it is that it's not for everybody. I'm not of the mindset that everybody in the world must trip.
Sure.
Because for some people it's not a good thing, and some people don't need to. I've got lots of friends that never took it, but they're the most psychedelic people I know.
Wow.
So it's this sort of thing. The other thing is, I think for some people it is very beneficial. But again, I'm back to the thing of setting and quantity. That's the thing.
Right.
It's very important to to think about what you're doing before you do it, to what you're doing for the few days before a trip affects you completely. This is things that Timothy Leary, Ram Dass, all these sort of people,
almost like
they
a
spoke
ritual.
about this.
Respect it.
So anytime I haven't respected it, I've had a bad time, or I haven't got the point, or I haven't, and so it's been a waste of an experience. I'll put it that way, sort of thing. So it's something to be treated with great respect, and it's something that's actually very useful and beneficial for some people. There's also something else to be said for going into the shamanic thing. I haven't done much of it in my life because, as I say, I grew up in Goa, big parts of my life, and I always was not anti-guru but anti-bullshit, and unfortunately a lot of these tend to get mixed together sort of thing, because people that are tripping and take psychedelics, they are very impressionable, and there is people that take advantage of this and that actually do things they shouldn't, so and my dad, he always said he wasn't a freak, he wasn't a hippie, he was a freak, and he made a difference between the two, sort of thing. So he's a very individualistic person that said think for yourself, sort of thing. That was his thing. So I grew up with that, with a healthy aversion to organize things, So, but it's only recently, actually, in the last 10 years, my wife had medical troubles, and as a part of her process of healing, I ended up in a peyote session with a shaman from Mexico. And I saw the benefit of it. I saw the benefit of being in a group of people and having a framework. So suddenly it was like, think of a group therapy session with the added ingredient of the psychedelic side of it that actually helped people to express themselves, to open up parts of themselves that might not have been so easily accessible otherwise. But I have to say, the shaman was a very he's from a tribe that works with humor, so it resonated very well with me. So it was very not serious, the whole thing. Lovely. But at the same time, I saw why the few guidelines that were there, because it's good to have a framework. But you don't need a shaman to do it. I've actually, you do need friends. I wouldn't do this by yourself. No. You can after a while if you want to, but it's good to have a support group of some sort. The sober companion is always a good one.
If things start floating, then you better have someone.
I've had friends helping me a lot of times.
Lovely.
And that's a good thing. So, but it's obviously a big part of this culture, and it always will be associated with it. And that's the tricky thing at the moment, is that psychedelic trance is actually going out into mainstream world, but it's not bringing the actual feeling with it at the same time. So I've been talking about this with friends a lot recently, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm still of the opinion that it's a good thing, because even though the actual message and point of it is not being translated into the mainstream world, some of it is.
At least some
because
of it.
You can't take it away from it, sort of thing, because that's what it's coming from. So, but I mean, this comes from 10 years ago more. I started giving presets out to everybody, and Parasense, everybody, all my friends, they were like, what the fuck are you doing, sort of thing. And I'm like, I'm helping people. This is what I was taught by my dad. He said, when you learn how to do something, you tell other people how to do it, they learn how to do it, and then they know how to do what you know how to do. So if you want to stay on top, you actually learn how to do stuff. So it pushes you.
Don't hold back.
But there's been a big sort of culture of holding back that I'd seen growing up with this thing, where you don't tell people what the secret thing is, and I totally disagreed with this. This didn't resonate with me at all. So I started giving them out, but the result is they were wrong and they were right. That's it. That's where I'm back, if you understand. Because now, and I'm seeing this happen again with this latest pandemic thing. Everybody started doing tutorials, masterclasses, tutorials at the wazoo.
Absolutely,
And now I've started watching them myself. I'm learning loads of stuff. I'm like, hey, cool, sort of thing. But it does mean that it's generalizing everything. Because again, you're back to the thing of, if someone shows you how to do it, you're not going to make your own journey. You're going to take the easy way out, sort of thing.
Shortcuts.
So all of those things don't carry the psychedelic message with it. That's the point I'm trying to get to. It's just taking the actual outward shell of it and bringing it into what's become psytrance, not psychedelic trance. Psytrance.
Hey,
you see what I mean?
Said.
I make psychedelic trance. I don't make psytrance. I've always said this sort of thing. But the Vini Vicis, this guy, Skazi, all these sort of guys, they're all good friends and everything. But they did change into something else. That is, but you have to, if you want to play bigger
Yeah.
events and do all this sort of stuff.
Correct.
If I tried to play it at a EDC or one of these sort of, it would never work.
Yeah,
People
sure.
would look at me,
Come
too
on.
much information.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
that doesn't work for me, sort of thing. So I don't want to change my music. I'm not going to go to those levels.
Yeah.
I'm happy where I am, sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
You know, so it's not a bad thing for other people.
No.
But even in the Scazi, Divini Vici, all this, there still is a bit of psychedelic that goes with it,
Definitely,
sort of
yeah.
thing, you know. And I'm just naming 2 names, but there's a lot of
Sure,
names, sort of
sure,
thing, you know.
sure.
It's not just them. But so generally beneficial. I'm happy
Mm.
to see it go out in the world. And I'd rather listen to that than to a lot of other styles, sort of thing.
Well
And
said.
I have to say, there is styles inside the psychedelic thing that have completely lost me. The
Right.
200 BPM plus,
Yeah,
all this
high
sort
tech
of stuff.
for you is
It's-
like, nah, you can't.
well, the lower BPM high tech, the 160,
I
175.
love it. That's what I
Great.
play. Like
I've
that
made- I've made
really
some of
gets
it.
me
That's good,
grooving.
you know?
You're making some?
Yeah, I've made some.
Wow.
Not at the moment, but I have,
Okay.
like,
Cool.
So that still
That's
goes for me.
what I
But when
really
it
like.
when it gets to the psychedelic experimentation stage,
Yeah.
I see the point.
Yeah.
I don't personally enjoy it, and as a party culture, I find it quite taxing. That's the word. It takes a lot of energy from people in a way.
I do
and
have
it does
to agree
encourage,
with you,
It
yeah.
encourages people to go too far with stuff as well.
Sure.
So
Oh,
it's a
yeah,
bit of
yeah.
mix of all that sort of stuff. Where I'm not against anything, but it's not my
Right.
cup of tea.
Yeah.
Put
Absolutely.
it that way.
I completely
Yeah.
understand. Now talking about the reputation of psytrance festivals, you know, like over the years, we are doing it for so long, but the people outside have got a different picture. What do you think is the picture of psytrance outside, and why do you reckon that is what it is?
I think psytrance has evolved. A lot of these festivals that were beacons of our actual culture are not anymore. They're a copy of it, something that became an actual good product.
Yeah,
And
true.
other people went, hey, wait, there's money to be made in there, sort of thing. And so it actually, I don't want to name names, but like this, but they lost the point.
Sure.
So for people, that's psytrance when they go to it.
Yeah.
But it's not really.
Yeah, I
There's
get
more
you.
psychedelic stuff
Yeah,
to
yeah.
be found in smaller events,
Underground.
new events, people that have good sort of energy that come out and they want to do this because they had an amazing experience and they want to translate this to other
Sure
people.
thing, yeah.
And of course they want to make money with it because that's how the world works as well.
Definitely.
But it hasn't got to such a big attraction that it's a sure thing that you're going to sell out all your tickets. Because once it gets to that point, there's very few of the big ones. Azora is still one of the good ones that actually manages to
definitely.
keep this sort of vibe. But there's very few of the big ones that manage to actually stay
Stay true to the
psychedelic, you know what I mean?
goal, yeah. And
So, but those are the ones that people see. So that
Definitely.
becomes psytrance for
them,
outside
yeah,
culture.
yeah.
And it still has a very beneficial effect. Even for, it's not the same magnitude as the ones we're talking about that are good, but somebody who's never been to a psychedelic event that goes to one of these other ones, they're going to get something out of it.
At least an introduction to what it could
An
be.
introduction, and a little bit,
definitely.
and they're going to have that little moment when the sun's going down and suddenly everything turns golden and they get a bit of contact high from people that are around, and the music hits a good spot and they have a little opening in the brain, and maybe they go home with this, sort of thing. So there still is a benefit from it,
So do you think psychedelic trance music is spiritual or touches some points of spirituality in some way?
Look, it depends on the person making it, but for me, the good tracks that I've heard other people make, and I've made very few of them myself, they're ones that when you hear them, you get the sense that they've always been there.
Oh, true.
And for me, that's a deeply spiritual sort of thing, because
Wow.
you're not listening to something that was made, you're listening to something that has decided to manifest.
Channel through some artist
for
and
that,
come through.
and that's that. And essentially, it's always the same rhythm. It's like, but you find this in blues and funk and other types of music as well. You have certain things, and certain people are able to do it to bring this thing through. And sometimes you meet the people afterwards, and you're like, "How the fuck did you make that?" So it was just a random circumstance of people in the studio, and like this sort of thing. So for me, that's the same divinity, if I put it that way, that I've met on my experiences. Manifesting through music.
Sure.
So, and for me, that's the point of this.
Absolutely.
Everything else around it is trying to get to that. And that's why I say the mixing thing that my friend Sanook showed me, that's one way of getting to it, because sometimes that doesn't exist in one track. It exists in the moment that's created on the dance floor, sort of thing. And that can even come in these commercial events that we're talking about. You can get these moments. You just get them for shorter, because the attention span of everybody, the bigger the crowd is, the shorter the attention span is. You know, the more you have to change what's going on,
said,
sort of thing. So yeah, that's the spiritual side of it for me.
Beautiful.
Then there's people that put mantras, this, that, the other. But for me, honestly, I get overloaded by mantras sometimes. You know, you're like, not another one, sort of thing like that. So it was good in the beginning when it was something amazingly new, and then it became a format, sort of thing.
Exactly.
So you do that, you'll get spirituality. But that doesn't mean that mantras won't be spiritual. You know, again, you can have the two existing together.
True that. So Ajja, with so much depth in your clarity of expression that it's coming from, what is the unique sound that you are trying to create from the past, and is it changing for the future?
There isn't a unique sound. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get to this holy grail that I was saying, the one of manifesting a track that was always there. And I don't think I've hit it yet. That's but that's why people like my music and they like coming to see my sets. But if I look around, I don't see that many other DJs playing my music. Because compared to people like Tristan and all these sort of guys that have been doing it a long time, they're much more able to make this in one track in a surefire way that somebody can play, and that's that sort of thing. So me, I've got the funniest story I ever said is that, like, Dick Trevor, he said, I want to remix a track, you know, so I gave him a track and he took it and he kind of tried, and he said, look, I took it apart and there's nothing there. He said there was no identifiable thing to remix, sort of thing. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to balance everything together into a vibrational, harmonious thing that I like, that then I can mix with other things. But it's not like it's not like other people that can manifest that, so it's not one thing. And when I get bored in the studio and when I get into a formula or writer's block, all this sort of stuff, I start making more solid things and I get away from this vibration thing. Whenever I come back to it after a while, after cleaning myself out of it, I get back to the vibration side of it. So that's what I'm doing.
That's what you're trying to get out of it. Like, it should convey that the channeling vibration, which is source energy in some way.
Well, it's this, but it's also it's physics again as well. I mean, a really important experience for me was I was in Amsterdam about 20 years ago, I think. A bit less, I'd already started making this, and I was high as a kite walking around the dance floor, sort of thing, and I kept, every time I went through the dance floor, I was seeing this mandala in front of my eyes that followed everywhere. Okay, it must be like, you know, just having fun, sort of thing, and then the track would change, and then there'd be a different mandala. I'd be like, okay, what's going on here? Something like, and this happened all through the night. And it's only like years later that I realized, I think, what it is. You must have seen this thing, kymatics or cymatics.
Cymatics, yes.
Where they have the flat thing with sand and the speaker. And you notice that at lower, when they put a low tone through the speaker, it goes from chaos into a mandala. And then as they turn the tone up, you get chaos, you get a finer mandala, chaos, finer mandala, chaos, finer. And as they go up, they get closer and closer together. The mandalas get finer and finer. And the transition between order and chaos gets shorter and shorter. Until by the end of it, it's above our range of perception and all you see is chaos, sort of thing. So the mandalas and the chaos are mixing together, but they're not. We just can't see them anymore. So once I got all this, I was like, okay, we're made of water and all this sort of stuff. We're large percent water. So that's what we're doing on these big fucking sound system, is we're sending out these bass waves and we're doing that to our bodies and our brains and everything, sort of thing. So that's what I'm trying to do when I'm making tracks. That's why I pay a lot of attention to the kick and bass and cleanliness and all this sort of stuff. And the voodoo hoodoo part of it comes in where my brain state depends on what I'm making, sort of thing. You know, if you have a few beers in the studio, you're not going to be able to do it as well as if you're sort of like clear sort of thing. Although both are good, you know.
Have you ever tried putting your music through the cymatic?
I've never had the opportunity to.
That would be cool to actually see what comes out of it.
That would be nice, But I've used internal cymatics to test them.
The ones you don't need to see, they feel them,
and I road test every track in the studio. I dance and all this sort of stuff.
Oh, true, you dance to it. That's nice. Now having a family with a beautiful daughter, how are you being able to balance work life, passion?
Well, a lot less studio time. That's the first one.
Yeah.
I can't do 5-day sessions anymore, like this sort of thing, because she's 3 years old now, Shakti, and she wants attention, and I don't want to deprive her of it.
Sure.
So I tend to work after midnight,
Oh, true.
when everything's gone to bed and quiet down. So it's changed my work mode.
Right.
I wasn't able to work for a couple of years, but also I quit tobacco. There's all these things happening, so I went into making. That's why I was making these chill live streams instead.
Sure, yeah.
It was a better fit for where I was. But recently, in the last year, I've come back to working a lot, and I'm lucky. I'm in a position where I can actually buy hardware synthesizers now and modulars and stuff. Get a bit into this.
Yeah, sure.
So I maximize my studio time, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm back to producing, and also there's a terrible thing that happened to the world with this pandemic thing, but at the same time, it was the luckiest possible time for me when Shakti was young.
Oh, wow.
So I wasn't traveling. I went from traveling every weekend to being at home full time when she was a few months old. So when she was almost 2 years old.
Sure.
So, and now she's understanding that I go away to work. She says, have a good time in Sao Paulo, sort of thing, you know what I mean? So she's got an idea that I travel,
And I think
so it's okay for the moment. Yeah.
And these are the years when she'll absorb all the energy from her father and her mother. And
She comes into the studio every day. I gave her my old drum machine from 20 years ago. She comes to play drum machine every day.
Oh, that's so cute.
And she likes it, so she wants to. And the amazing thing the other day actually is, just as a little story, this drum machine, it's an old Electribe. She always pushes record and then play before she starts a pattern. So a few weeks ago I told her, look, you don't have to push record, you can just push play. She says, no, I like the red because it makes me feel good. And then when I push the green and the sound starts, it makes me feel.
wow.
And I was like,
Shakti.
whoa. I was like, where did you get that from? And I was like, can you say that again? And I actually filmed her saying it because I wanted to show it to her when she's older. But it's not something I say, it's not something, so that's her internal sort of interpretation of. But this is, you look at kids are great with music, they have rhythm and all. Most kids are a blank slate and they're amazing little beings. And unfortunately, a lot of parents don't have a lot of time, and they have to go to work and they have life pressure and stress, and then kids go to school and all this sort of thing, I'm an aberration. I hit psychedelics very young, and I also didn't go through the school system.
Right.
So the two of those together mean that I was able to have a different path, but it also means that it set me apart from other kids.
Sure thing.
So it's not something I'd recommend for everybody.
Right,
Right. Shakti's an only child. Well, no, she has a brother, but she's 23, so at home she's an only child at the moment. So we're going to put her through the school system. We found good schools because it's also important to have this human connection with people.
Absolutely. I think for human development, it's important to be able to be in community or similar age people. So thank you so much for these in-depth and deep conversations.
Thank you.
What comes to your mind when you think of New Zealand?
Look, very pretty. That's what. Very nice people, quirky people,
Yeah.
and
Kiwis.
an amazing landscape. All my friends that are from there, they've said you have to come.
Absolutely.
So this is the thing. So I'm gonna make it one day in my life.
Yeah.
I don't travel far because I want to come back. The last time I was even in Australia was 2014, I think.
Right.
13 or 14 for Lost the Plot Festival. Yeah.
Okay.
So just to give you
That's
an
a
idea of how
long
little I
time.
actually
Yeah,
traveled that far, sort of
Okay.
thing. But the next time I go that far, I've got it in
Good
my
to
brain
stay.
that I want to come with Shakti and Tanya.
Exactly.
So
No,
that
you're
we
going to stay
actually
for a month over there, to have a camper van, drive down all of New Zealand. That's the best way to do it. And we'll have Yatra going on. So if you have a chance, we'd love to have you there. Yeah, it's the best time in the summer, and that's when New Zealand welcomes everybody to come have a good time. So it'll be a pleasure to be able to host you at Yatra.
We can work it out.
But thank you so much, Ajja. This has been an honor, and it's been one of my life dreams to be able to catch up with you and actually have a deep conversation about creativity. So thank you for your time.
Glad we took the time.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, have a lovely one and bring in a hug. Alrighty.
Thanks.
Cheers.